The Kootenai, also recognized as the Kutenai or Ktunaxa, represent a distinguished indigenous people whose heritage is deeply interwoven with the landscapes of southeastern British Columbia and parts of northern Montana and Idaho. Their identity is marked by a profound connection to their ancestral lands and a cultural legacy that stands apart. For over 10,000 years, the Ktunaxa have inhabited the territories surrounding the Kootenay and Columbia Rivers and the Arrow Lakes in British Columbia. This expansive traditional domain, stretching across approximately 70,000 square kilometers, historically extended into areas now known as Alberta, Montana, Washington, and Idaho. This vast land provided all essential sustenance, including food, medicine, shelter, and clothing, as the Ktunaxa skillfully hunted, fished, and gathered across the diverse terrains of the Rocky Mountains and the Great Plains of both Canada and the United States. A defining characteristic of the Kutenai people is their language, Ktunaxa, which is classified as a linguistic isolate. This means the Ktunaxa language is unique, bearing no known genetic relationship to any other language family globally, setting it apart from the languages of all neighboring indigenous groups. This linguistic distinctiveness is not merely an academic classification. It reflects a long and independent trajectory of cultural development. Had the Kootenai experienced sustained and significant integration with other populations, their language would likely exhibit shared roots with surrounding linguistic families. The extensive traditional territory they have occupied for millennia further supports the understanding that their culture, including their language and unique practices, evolved largely autonomously, free from external linguistic influences. Despite its profound uniqueness and cultural significance, the Ktunaxa language faces critical endangerment, making its revitalization a central and urgent aspect of contemporary Kootenai identity and cultural preservation efforts. Historically, the Kootenai people maintained a nomadic existence, primarily as skilled hunters of bison, often traversing the Rocky Mountains to reach the Great Plains for these hunts. Their prowess extended to hunting mountain game such as bighorn sheep and goats, a practice that contributed to their notable height and strong leg musculature. Fishing was equally vital to their sustenance, with salmon, steelhead, trout, and sturgeon being key species harvested through various techniques, including nets, spears, and fish traps. They also gathered other aquatic resources like lampreys, eels, and whitefish. Their way of life was deeply intertwined with nature, reflecting a profound respect for the environment that provided them with food, medicine, shelter, and clothing. The Kootenai were also recognized for their exceptional ingenuity and adaptability, particularly in their skills of canoe building and horse raising. Their distinctive sturgeon-nosed canoes were a testament to their mastery of water travel, while their strong horse culture was indispensable for hunting and transportation across land. Beyond utility, horses also provided meat and hides for clothing and shelter. The combination of diverse hunting and fishing practices, coupled with varied transportation methods, canoes for navigating rivers and lakes, and horses for traversing plains and mountains, demonstrates a highly adaptive strategy for acquiring resources across a vast and varied landscape. This flexibility was crucial for their survival in an environment characterized by seasonal fluctuations and varying resource availability. In terms of social organization, the Kootenai traditionally lived in smaller, nomadic bands, each operating without a centralized government, but guided by its own leader and a council of elders. They were broadly divided into two main dialect groups: the Upper Kootenai, residing along the Upper Kootenay and Columbia Rivers, and the Lower Kootenai, inhabiting the Lower Kootenay River region. Their social fabric placed a strong emphasis on family and community, with small villages or camps structured around extended family units that collaboratively shared resources and labor. A particularly significant aspect of Kootenai society was its matrilineal kinship system, where lineage and inheritance were traced through the mother's line. In a nomadic, decentralized society, this system provided a robust mechanism for continuity and stability. Tracing identity through the mother ensured a clear and consistent framework for belonging, even as bands moved and interacted. Furthermore, with women often responsible for gathering and processing resources, their authority in resource transmission and leader selection would have been fundamental for effective knowledge transfer regarding foraging territories, plant cycles, and resource allocation. This structure fostered inherent resilience and a stable social foundation within their highly mobile and adaptable way of life, contributing significantly to the long-term well-being of the community without necessitating a rigid centralized governing body. Kootenai spiritual beliefs were deeply rooted in animism, with the sun, often personified as a woman, revered as the supreme and most benevolent deity. They held beliefs in a creator god known as Ktunaxa, along with various supernatural beings and spirits associated with animals, plants, and natural phenomena. A core tenet was the concept of an afterlife, where the spirits of the deceased journeyed to the sun's abode, with the expectation of reuniting with the living at a sacred pilgrimage site on the shores of Pandaray Lake. Shamans played a pivotal role as spiritual guides, dream interpreters, and healers, wielding extraordinary power for both benevolent and malevolent purposes. They led sacred ceremonies that involved trances, communication with ancestors, and even the ability to influence natural elements like weather. Rituals and ceremonies were woven into the fabric of daily life, including offerings of tobacco to spirits for health, safety, and expressions of gratitude. Specific ceremonies included the Crazy Owl Society, an all-female group dedicated to combating epidemics, the Blanket Dance, a spiritual meeting with spirits for assistance, the Sun Dance, adopted from the Plains tribes and focused on hunting success, the Grizzly Bear Dance, an early spring prayer for abundance and guidance in finding food, and the Fir Tree Dance, performed during times of famine to bring game back to the region. Burial customs were simpler, involving the wrapping of the corpse and quick burial by two individuals, often in a talus slope without elaborate ceremonies. Spouses would cut their hair as a symbol of mourning. The profound spiritual connection to the land and its resources, manifested in these specific ceremonies tied to hunting and gathering, was not merely symbolic. These rituals likely served to reinforce crucial ecological knowledge, promote communal cooperation in resource management, and provide psychological resilience during periods of scarcity. This spiritual framework provided a coherent worldview that guided their interactions with the environment, ensuring sustainable practices and fostering a collective sense of purpose vital for their survival. Thus, their spiritual harmony was an integral, functional component of their adaptive success, directly contributing to their ability to thrive in a challenging landscape. The Kutenai people, owing to their geographically isolated location, were among the last indigenous communities in North America to experience contact with European explorers and traders. Initial encounters with non-indigenous individuals and traders began around 1795, with figures like Duncan McGillivray noted as early contacts. In the early 1800s, explorer David Thompson established trade relations for the Northwest Company, founding a trade post named Kootenai House in 1807. The famous Lewis and Clark expedition also documented their encounter with the Kootenai tribe
in the Bitterroot Valley, Montana, between 1804 and 1806. The arrival of fur trappers and traders, closely following the early explorers, brought significant changes, introducing alcohol, diseases, and a new economic system to native populations. The Kootenai, like other tribes, engaged in the burgeoning fur trade, exchanging valuable pelts for European manufactured goods such as guns, metal arrowheads, scissors, and iron pots. These items were initially perceived as advantageous, either simplifying daily tasks or providing a tactical edge in intertribal conflicts. However, this integration into a global economy, over which the Kootenai had minimal influence, led to an increasing reliance on externally produced goods,
suddenly eroding their traditional self-sufficiency. The fur trade, while seemingly offering immediate benefits through new material goods, inadvertently created a dependency that undermined traditional self-sufficiency and exacerbated existing intertribal conflicts. The initial appeal of European goods, particularly durable metal tools and powerful firearms, led to their integration into Kootenai daily life and warfare strategies. This created a positive feedback loop where the perceived advantages drove increased participation in the fur trade. However, this participation gradually shifted their economic focus from purely subsistence-based activities to a reliance on external trade for essential goods. This dependency meant that the Kootenai's well-being became tied to the fluctuating demands and control of the European market, diminishing their traditional self-sufficiency. Furthermore, the introduction of firearms, while offering a tactical advantage, also escalated the intensity and lethality of pre-existing intertribal conflicts, such as those with the Blackfoot, transforming competitive interactions into more destructive warfare and increasing internal divisions as groups vied for access to these new technologies. This illustrates a complex causal chain where short-term advantages led to long-term vulnerabilities and increased societal disruption. Beyond economic shifts, European diseases, most notably smallpox epidemics, had a devastating impact on Kootenai communities. These epidemics resulted in high mortality rates and significantly reduced their population numbers, forcing some Plains Ktunaxa to retreat back to the Kootenai region of British Columbia. Compounding these challenges were historical conflicts with neighboring tribes. In prehistoric times, the Kootenai were driven westward from their original territories east of the Rocky Mountains by their traditional adversaries, the Blackfoot people. Relations with the Blackfoot were frequently marked by violent confrontations over access to food resources, particularly during bison hunts on the plains. The combined pressures of European diseases and intensified warfare, partly fueled by the new European goods, created a profound demographic and social crisis for the Kootenai. The catastrophic population decline due to diseases severely weakened their communities, making them more vulnerable to external threats. This demographic crisis coincided with an escalation of existing intertribal warfare, especially with the Blackfoot, which became more lethal due to the introduction of European firearms through the fur trade. This dual pressure created a survival imperative that fundamentally altered Kootenai's societal organization and geographic presence. It necessitated strategic migrations, such as the return of the Plains Ktunaxa to British Columbia, as they sought safer, more defensible territories. It also compelled new forms of cooperation, leading to alliances with previously distinct tribes like the Flathead or Kalispel for collective defense and resource acquisition, such as buffalo hunting. This demonstrates a cascading effect where initial contact led to disease and new technologies, which in turn exacerbated existing conflicts and forced significant long-term shifts in Kootenai demography, settlement patterns, and intertribal relations, profoundly impacting their traditional way of life. In 1855, the United States government initiated efforts to establish a treaty with various tribes in the Northwest, including the Kootenai at Hellgate in Montana. The primary objective was to acquire Aboriginal territory and confine tribes to reservations. Notably, no Kootenai representative ever affixed their signature to the Hellgate Treaty.
This refusal to sign the Hellgate Treaty underscores their persistent assertion of sovereignty. Despite their conscious and collective decision to withhold consent, the Kootenai were nonetheless subjected to the de facto imposition of reservation life and significant land loss. This reveals a critical tension between the Kootenai's legal and moral claim to self-government, expressed by their non-compliance, and the overwhelming power imbalance that allowed the U.S. to proceed with its agenda. Their refusal, while not preventing the loss of land, established a foundational historical precedent for their ongoing resistance and claims to Aboriginal rights, demonstrating an unwavering commitment to their ancestral lands and inherent self-government that continued to defy external recognition. Despite their non-participation, the treaty, which was signed by the Salish and Pendore tribes, led to the establishment of the Flathead Indian Reservation and resulted in the Kootenai being relocated to both the Flathead and Kootenai reservations. The treaty did acknowledge tribal sovereignty and reserved specific rights, including the exclusive right of taking fish in all streams running through and bordering the reservation, as well as the right to fish, hunt, and gather in customary off-reservation areas in common with non-Indian settlers. However, negotiations were fraught with poor translation. Yet the treaty remains a fundamental document for the tribe's sovereign rights today, forming the basis for their resource management. Following the treaty, the Kootenai experienced further loss of their ancestral lands. Despite earlier assurances that the lands along the Kootenai River would remain theirs, much of it was progressively taken away. More than 500,000 acres of the Flathead Reservation were lost from tribal ownership during the land allotment process, which commenced in 1904. Few Kootenai individuals received allotments during the 1930s, further exacerbating their dispossession. In 1960, the U.S. government granted the Kootenais $425,000 as compensation for lost Aboriginal territory, but this financial settlement came with strings attached, perpetuating their ongoing struggle. The establishment of the U.S.-Canadian border in 1860, with some Kootenai assistance, further fragmented the people into 7 distinct communities. A deeply traumatic chapter in Kootenai history, particularly for those in Canada, involves the residential school system. Many Kootenai children were forcibly removed from their families and communities and sent to these boarding schools. The system's explicit goal was to isolate Indigenous children from their cultural and religious influences and assimilate them into dominant Euro-Canadian society. These schools inflicted immense harm, including widespread physical, sexual, emotional, and psychological abuse, coupled with malnutrition and disease, leading to alarmingly high death tolls among students. Children were strictly prohibited from acknowledging their Indigenous heritage, speaking their languages, or practicing their traditional faiths, often facing severe punishment for defiance. This systematic suppression resulted in a profound loss of language and culture, disrupting family structures for generations and contributing to enduring issues such as post-traumatic stress and substance abuse in Indigenous communities. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada later formally recognized this system as cultural genocide. The residential school system in Canada represents a deliberate, systemic attempt at cultural annihilation. The consistent, systematic nature of the residential school policies, compulsory attendance, physical separation from families, prohibition of language and cultural practices, indicates a deliberate state-sanctioned program of cultural eradication, not merely education. This systematic approach, recognized as cultural genocide, aimed to destroy Indigenous identity at its roots by targeting children, the carriers of future culture. The profound and widespread abuses, coupled with the severing of intergenerational cultural transmission, created deep-seated, complex trauma that continues to manifest in contemporary social and health challenges within Kootenai communities. This means that current revitalization efforts are not just about preserving culture, but are fundamental acts of healing from historical wounds and decolonization. They are necessary to address the root causes of contemporary issues by rebuilding cultural identity, language, and community bonds that were systematically attacked, demonstrating a direct causal link between historical assimilation policies and the urgent need for culturally rooted restoration today. In a powerful demonstration of resilience, the Kutenai tribe of Idaho, after enduring years of hardship and land dispossession, declared a peaceful war on the United States on September 20th, 1974. This strategic act, though nonviolent, successfully garnered significant public and bureaucratic attention, ultimately leading to the tribe being granted 12.5 acres of trust lands. This marked a pivotal moment, signaling an improvement in the tribe's circumstances. Since this watershed event, the Kutenai tribe of Idaho has steadily expanded its influence across a broader expanse of its traditional territory, steadfastly upholding their sacred covenant with the Creator to protect and preserve the land for all time. Recognizing the critical endangerment of the Ktunaxa language, substantial efforts are now underway to cultivate fluent speakers and ensure its perpetuation for future generations. These initiatives include early language education programs in schools, such as a Ktunaxa school and Head Start programs, underscoring the importance of early immersion. Modern technological tools are being integrated into these efforts, exemplified by the Kutenai language app, a comprehensive bilingual dictionary and phrase collection, and online university studies courses offered by institutions like the College of the Rockies.